February 2020, Sunny Isles Beach, Florida. A rented car rolls through the gated garage of a luxury high-rise, and a security guard flags it down. The driver has no pass. While he argues with the guard, his wife slips out of the passenger seat, walks down the row of parked cars, raises her phone, and photographs a single license plate. The rule this mission was built on, nothing digital, nothing a border search could find, has just been broken in front of a witness. That plate belongs to a man Russian intelligence has hunted for a decade, across 3 continents, through a 25-year prison sentence, a televised death vow from Vladimir Putin himself, and a death notice planted on a Russian newswire. 10 years of hunting have narrowed to this: a superpower's cross-planet operation, a coerced operative at the wheel, his family held in Moscow as leverage, idling 7 floors and 1 parking space from its target. Because here's what the guard doesn't know, and what the couple in the car doesn't know either. A decade earlier, the man upstairs helped run the most secret program Russian intelligence has ever built. He held the Kremlin's deepest identities in his hands. Then, one summer morning, he vanished. What did he take that made a head of state promise his death on camera? And right now, with the hunt idling in his parking garage, does he even know they're here? Start in Moscow, start inside the vault. Brest, Belarus, 1952. Aleksandr Poteyev is born into Soviet royalty of a specific kind. His father, Neil Poteyev, is a hero of the Soviet Union, a decorated tank officer. The son follows the path laid out for him, KGB. Then the elite Spetsnaz units Zenit and Kaskad, the formations that fought the dirty war in Afghanistan. He earns his decorations the hard way in a real war with real blood, and the system rewards him. In the 1990s, Poteyev lands the posting every Russian intelligence officer dreams of: New York, under UN cover. Picture him there, a decorated Afghan war veteran in his 40s, walking to work through Midtown, past newsstands selling papers nobody censored, into the city his entire education had taught him to treat as the enemy's capital. His children come with him, and they're the ones who really move in. They pick up the language. They start building lives that have nothing to do with Moscow. Then Moscow ends it. Tour's over. Come home. He asked to stay. He put in the request through channels, the loyal way, the way his father would have done it. Medals on the table, a lifetime of service behind the ask. And the service that owned his father's loyalty and his own war record said no. Get on the plane. He gets on the plane. Something in him doesn't. The exact moment America recruited him has never been made public. Around 1999, maybe 2000, is as close as anyone outside Langley can pin it. Money is the obvious theory. Resentment over that forced flight home is probably the better one, and his children were already halfway out the door to the West. The CIA has never confirmed a word of it. Roughly a year after Aleksandr Poteyev became an American asset, the SVR, Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, the direct heir of the KGB, promoted him. Straight up, into the deputy's chair of Department 4 of Directorate S, the America's desk of the single most secret program Russia runs, the illegals. Deep cover officers living inside the United States under manufactured identities. No embassy protection, no diplomatic immunity, the crown jewels. Think about what that means. Washington's mole didn't have to steal his way into the vault. Moscow handed him the keys and congratulated him on the promotion. So he sits down at the new desk. In front of him, a decade's worth of secret identities and the money pipelines feeding every Russian ghost living inside America. What does a mole do with all of it? To understand what Poteyev was holding, you have to understand what an illegal is, because the movie version barely scratches it. An illegal is a Russian intelligence officer who stops being Russian. The SVR erases them and builds a new human being from scratch, a name lifted from a child who died decades earlier, backstopped by forged records reaching all the way down to a fake childhood. Then they're planted in America to live an entire life there. 20 years, 30 years, long enough to marry, long enough to coach a kid's little league team. Take the couple living in suburban New Jersey as Richard and Cynthia Murphy. A house, careers, and 2 daughters. Daughters who don't speak a word of Russian and believe their own names. Any one of those lives can be annihilated by a single line in a single file, read by the wrong man. The entire program rests on one assumption: the identities stay secret. In 2000, Moscow placed that assumption in the hands of Aleksandr Poteyev, because from that desk, he began handing Washington the blueprints, who the ghosts really were, and how Moscow whispered to them across an ocean. This is why the FBI's surveillance operation, codenamed Ghost Stories, could afford to be patient. For years, agents filmed the dead drops and never had to guess where to point the camera. 10 years of fresh identities and wired dollars, all of it landing sooner or later in an American file. That's a demolition charge packed under the most expensive intelligence program Russia runs. One of the names in that network you already know, even if you don't realize it yet. A young redhead in New York, running a real estate business, photographed at Manhattan parties. Anna Chapman. Remember her, because when this network finally comes apart, she's the one who pulls the first thread without knowing it. For roughly 10 years, this holds. The mole feeds. The FBI watches. Moscow suspects nothing. Then, in the spring of 2010, inside SVR headquarters, somebody says the word out loud: leak. Operations in America keep failing, and failures this consistent aren't luck. A leak inside Directorate S can only come from the top. The hunt begins in Poteyev's own hallway. Counterintelligence runs on a cruel piece of geometry. The better the secret, the shorter the suspect list. File-level access to the illegals' identities narrowed the field to a handful of men in the entire Russian Federation, and one of them was the deputy running the Americas department. Poteyev knows exactly how short that list is. He's spent a career drawing up lists like it for other men. His commute that spring becomes its own kind of interrogation. Each morning he badges into the building that is hunting him, walks the same corridor, and reads the faces coming the other way, weighing which glances are ordinary and which have started to linger. A meeting invite lands. Routine or the trap closing? He can't know. So he holds his rhythm. He signs what crosses his desk and smiles at men who may already have his name on a short list, because the first officer to act nervous is the first name that gets circled. He recognizes every move being made around him. They're the moves he would make. And that spring, 2 doors slam almost at once. Door 1, polygraphs. Directorate S schedules lie detector examinations for its senior officers. Routine, they say. But a polygraph doesn't care about 10 years of flawless performance. Tradecraft can be rehearsed. A heartbeat can't. There is a date on a calendar now, and on that date, a machine is going to ask him questions he cannot survive answering. Dr. 2, his exit. A man who spends 10 years betraying the SVR does not fail to plan his own escape. Poteyev had a cover story banked for exactly this moment. Personal travel, family matters, a reason to be out of the country that no one would question. He asks for it. Denied. The threat is inside the building now. A man in his position has to assume the worst, because assuming the best is how moles end up in a basement in Lefortovo prison. Run now, with no cover story and almost no head start. Or stay, walk into the polygraph room, and gamble everything on a machine. 10 years of patient, flawless tradecraft, and it all comes down to a decision he has days, maybe hours, to make. Late June 2010. Witnesses at his trial describe it almost casually. Poteyev is at SVR headquarters in a meeting, mid-conversation, and he excuses himself, walks out of the room, out of the building. He never comes back. He carries nothing out, because everything that matters left years ago, one file at a time. What he leaves behind is an empty chair at Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service and a head start measured in hours. The run begins. And there's one thing Poteyev cannot know as he moves. 4,600 miles away in New York City, a second clock has just started ticking, one that has nothing to do with him and everything to do with whether he makes it out alive. Moscow. A man in his late 50s boards a train heading west toward Belarus. It's the smart first move. He was born in Brest, this is ground he knows, and the frontier between Russia and Belarus barely exists. A union state, no real passport control. A false passport in his pocket. He takes the train because planes mean manifests, and manifests mean names. But Belarus can only ever be a corridor. Minsk's security service still calls itself the KGB, and shares nearly everything with Moscow. He can move through Belarus. He cannot stop there. The exit that actually matters lies south, at the Ukrainian border. The first line on the map where those false papers either work or end everything. Somewhere in those hours, he takes out his phone and types a message to his wife, Marina. The message that would later be read aloud in a Moscow courtroom. "Mary, try to take this calmly. I am leaving not for a time, but forever. I did not want this, but I had to. I am starting a new life. I will try to help the children." He reads it once. Send. 30 years of marriage, ended in a text from a moving train. She stays behind, inside Russia. The children, the ones whose Western lives may have started this whole thing. Try. One soft, unscripted word from a man who has scripted every move for a decade. Then the phone goes back in his pocket. The countryside keeps sliding past the window, and his face gives the passengers around him nothing at all. Meanwhile, in New York, the operation is starting to shake apart. June 26, 2010. Anna Chapman gets a phone call from a man presenting himself as a Russian consulate contact. They meet in a Manhattan coffee shop. He slides a fraudulent passport across the table and gives her the assignment: deliver it tomorrow morning to another deep cover illegal, a woman she has never met, at a location she has never used. Every hour of her training screams at once: illegals don't meet. Illegals never touch each other's documents. The entire architecture of the program exists so that no single officer can burn another. And this stranger from the consulate has just asked her to do exactly that. The man is an undercover FBI agent, and the request itself is the alarm bell. Instead of following procedure, she picks up a phone and calls her father in Moscow, a former senior official, on a line she has to assume is monitored. His verdict? Something is very wrong. That phone call burns through 10 years of FBI patience in a single night. A spooked illegal warns Moscow, and warned illegals vanish. Ghost Stories has to end now. The arrests get moved up. So Poteyev is threading west on false papers, while in New York, the woman whose file he burned is unknowingly racing him to the same deadline. If Moscow confirms the network is blown before he crosses his last border, every checkpoint between him and freedom becomes a trap with his photograph on the wall. The crossing into Ukraine is where the whole decade compresses into minutes. The train stops, boots on the platform. Border guards work their way down the cars, and one of them takes the passport of a gray-haired man traveling alone, a document built to survive exactly this look, held out by a hand that cannot be allowed to shake. The guard studies the photo, the face, the photo again. Poteyev spent 30 years teaching officers how to sit inside this exact moment, and now the training is all he has. Breathe normally, look bored. If Chapman's phone call has already climbed the chain in Moscow, his description is on a list at this window, and the story ends on this platform. The stamp comes down, the boots move on, then a departure gate and a ticket routed through Frankfurt. The longest walk in aviation is the corridor to the plane, where one uniformed man glancing at a screen can still end everything. Wheels up. Somewhere over Europe, the son of a hero of the Soviet Union passes out of Russian reach. In Frankfurt, a CIA handler is waiting. A familiar face, a car with the engine running, and from there, American soil, right around June 26th. The margin, when you line the dates up, days, maybe barely more than one. June 27th, 2010. Dawn. FBI teams move simultaneously across 4 states: New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Virginia. 10 deep-cover Russian illegals arrested in a single coordinated sweep. The Murphys of New Jersey, taken in front of the daughters who still don't know. Anna Chapman, in custody in Manhattan. The biggest spy roundup in modern American history, executed in hours. A program Russia spent decades and fortunes constructing, annihilated in a morning. And the man who burned it all is already gone. The mole hunt missed him. The polygraph never got its date with him. But the win comes with a bill. His wife is inside Russia. And from this morning forward, the SVR owns the most humiliating loss in its modern history. And every finger in the building points at the same empty chair. One operative is about to slip through the FBI's fingers entirely. And in Moscow, the most powerful man in Russia is about to make this personal. First, the loose thread. There was an 11th operative, the paymaster, traveling under the name Christopher Metzos. He wasn't in the United States when the sweep came down. Police grab him in Cyprus 2 days after the arrests, and a local court does something extraordinary with the financier of a superpower spy network. It grants him bail. Metzos walks out of custody, returns to his hotel, hangs a "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door, and evaporates. Never recaptured, never seen again. The FBI ran a 10-year operation with near-perfect execution, and the money man beat it with a hotel door sign. The 10 who were caught never see a trial worth the name. 12 days after the arrests, July 9th, 2010, 2 planes taxi toward each other on a runway in Vienna and stop, close enough to trade cargo. The world's cameras are held at the fence line, lenses straining across the tarmac. Stairs come down on both aircraft. Then it happens. The biggest spy swap since the Cold War, conducted like a prisoner exchange on a bridge in 1962. 10 Russian illegals walking one way, 4 prisoners pulled from Moscow's jails walking the other. 2 lines of people passing each other on Austrian concrete without a word. No handshakes, no signatures anyone can see. 10 for 4, and the ledger closes in under 2 weeks. In the Russian line walks a redhead. Anna Chapman, the woman who pulled the first thread, climbs the stairs an exposed spy and lands in Moscow something else entirely. Within months, she is a celebrity. The face the Kremlin chooses to put on its catastrophe, because a photogenic redhead makes better television than an empty chair in Directorate S. The cameras that once caught her at Manhattan parties simply change nationality. Now watch the 4 men walking the other way. One of them is a former intelligence officer named Sergei Skripal. He steps off the tarmac a free man. 8 years from this moment, Russian operatives will find him in Salisbury, England, and poison him and his daughter with Novichok, a military-grade nerve agent deployed on a quiet residential street in a NATO country. 8 years. Moscow waited 8 years. Which brings us to December 2010 and a television camera in Moscow. Vladimir Putin, himself a former KGB officer, a man who understands this betrayal in his bones, is asked about the destroyed network, about the traitor. His answer, delivered with that flat, unhurried certainty: traitors always end badly, as drunks, as drug addicts. Traitors will kick the bucket on their own. Under the folksy phrasing sits something colder, a head of state on camera, promising the death of one specific man. That's a vow. And a vow like this carries no statute of limitations and no appeals process. 6 months later, in June 2011, 1 year almost to the day after the arrests, a Moscow military court convicts Aleksandr Poteyev in absentia. Treason and desertion. 25 years. The court strips his colonel's rank and his state decorations. Paper punishments for a man made of paper now. Moscow wanted his body. The court could only sentence his name. A verdict with no prisoner. Moscow needed the trial anyway. A state has to be seen doing something. For 5 years, nothing. Silence. The ghost stays a ghost. Then, in July 2016, Russian state media announces that Aleksandr Poteyev is dead. You already know better. You've seen the Florida garage. 4 years after this obituary runs, the hunt is still idling under his building. So the question was never whether he died. The question is why the heirs of the KGB would publish a death they couldn't prove. And the answer is older than the SVR itself. July 2016. The report moves on the Interfax wire in Moscow, sourced to anonymous officials. Aleksandr Poteyev has died in the United States. Read it a second time and it dissolves in your hands. No cause of death, no city, not even a date. A death announcement with every checkable fact stripped out except the death itself. American officials won't confirm it. No Western outlet can verify it. Here's the old counterintelligence play for finding a man who has vanished. Announce his death, then put watchers on everyone inside Russia who loved him. Whoever grieves is telling the truth. Whoever picks up a phone instead, or doesn't react at all, just lit up the board. Was the obituary that play? Maybe it was a sourcing error. Maybe something darker. But no evidence of an actual death ever surfaced. Not one shred. Instead, the opposite surfaced. In 2019, In 2020, the dead man turned up in Florida public records. These weren't classified intercepts. A skip tracer checks these databases before lunch. Alive, in the Miami area, living under light cover. Among the paperwork, a voter registration, filed under his own name. The corpse from the Interfax report was filling out ballots in the Sunshine State. But underneath the punchline runs a darker current. If a reporter with a laptop could find him, so could the people who published his obituary to smoke him out. And in 2019, on the other side of the planet, the SVR's answer was already taking shape. In Singapore, a respected microbiologist put his Russian wife and daughters on a plane to Russia for a visit. When they tried to leave, they were quietly stopped at the border. No charges, no explanation. They simply couldn't go home. A trap was being assembled around a man who had never heard the name Poteyev, and its hostages were his own family. His name is Hector Cabrera Fuentes, and he is nobody's idea of an assassin. A Mexican scientist, a microbiologist working at the Duke NUS Medical School in Singapore, a specialist in cardiovascular research, and a man with a complicated private life because he has two families, a wife in Mexico and a Russian wife with two daughters. It's the Russian family that makes him ownable. In 2019, with his Russian wife and daughters trapped behind Moscow's border, a Russian intelligence officer came to him with a request shaped like a favor and weighted like a threat. Go to Miami. Do a small thing for us. And the unspoken half of the sentence hanging in the air. Think about where your daughters are. According to the federal complaint filed in the Southern District of Florida, the mission was surgical. Travel to Miami-Dade. Go to a specific luxury residential complex in the Sunny Isles area. Locate a specific vehicle belonging to a specific individual, described in the charging documents only as a U.S. government source. Get the license plate number and where the car sits, and do it quietly. Physical description only. Nothing digital that could be searched at a border. Court papers never name the target, but lay that address against the timeline of everything you've just watched, and the target names himself. The man Russia had been failing to kill for a decade, living in that very tower. They were past searching. Moscow knew the building. Now they wanted the plate and the parking spot, the targeting package. This was the escalation with nothing above it, running on American soil, one garage length from his front door. In February 2020, Cabrera Fuentes flies into Miami, and here the two halves of his double life collide because the wife beside him in the rental car is his Mexican wife, while the Russian wife whose freedom this errand is supposed to buy waits on the far side of Moscow's border. They drive to the tower. Everything, to this exact moment, has gone the way Moscow drew it. And now you're back in the scene where this story began. The rented car noses into the gated garage. No resident pass. The security guard stops them. A minor snag, an argument at a barrier arm. And while her husband is occupied with the guard, his wife gets out, finds the target's car, and takes a photograph of the license plate. Nothing digital, the rule the entire mission was built around. And now the mission sits in a camera roll, captured in front of a witness, inside the target's building. The couple drives away. Upstairs, the man being hunted never learns how close it just came. For a few days, Moscow's operation is still alive. Plate collected, the targeting package filling in. Then, Miami International Airport. The couple is leaving the country when they're pulled into a routine secondary inspection. A customs officer swipes through her phone. An ordinary camera roll, an ordinary couple, and stops. There it is. One photograph of a license plate. In a windowless interview room, the cover story cracks one contradiction at a time. And then it stops being a story at all. Cabrera Fuentes tells them about the officer in Moscow. About the small favor that wasn't one. About the wife and two daughters who boarded a plane out of Singapore and were never allowed to board one back. His voice holds the flat, careful register of a man who presents research for a living, right up until he reaches the daughters, and then it doesn't. Beside him sits his Mexican wife, absorbing in real time that her marriage contains a second family in Russia, and that the second family is the reason she just photographed a license plate for the SVR. When the cuffs close, they close on a cardiovascular researcher who never chose this war, a man Moscow reached through his daughters and dropped the moment the photograph surfaced. He is charged with acting as an agent of a foreign government. In 2022, he pleads guilty in federal court. Step back and look at the machinery behind that snapshot. A family held hostage on the far side of the planet just to move one frightened scientist into a Miami parking garage, after years of searching had finally narrowed a global manhunt to a single parking space directly beneath the target's feet. 10 years of hunting had never come closer. And it all died at an airport inspection table. Because somebody took a picture. The operation is dead. The target upstairs is very much alive. The Kremlin's ceiling escalation collapsed the way everything in this story collapses. In public, in a court file anyone can download. Somewhere in Moscow, the file on Aleksandr Poteyev is still open. Nobody has ever managed to close it. And Poteyev is not the only ghost Russia's machine has lost and never stopped hunting. If you want to see what happens when the man they're chasing decides to fight back instead of hide, watch this next.